No, I don't believe so. Let me start, Christine, by saying this. The NFL, this is my plea to you. Bring back the third quarterback. What San Francisco had to go through in that NFC Championship game is just not fair. So bring that back to make sure every roster could have 3 quarterbacks on game day. This is why I say no. Number one, Brock Purdy was really good this year. Really good. And I would say he was the clear-cut starter going into next year a week ago. But because of the injury and not knowing potentially what could happen, now the expectation is his arm is going to be stronger. You're really encouraged by what he showed this year and what he can be as a starter in the future. For Trey Lance, I think it's 2 things. One, you got to prove that you can stay healthy. I don't care how talented you are. The second thing is this. He hasn't played consistent competitive football in over 1,000 days. He needs to stay healthy and needs to get on the field. But I think with those 2 guys, you move forward.
All right. In case you missed it yesterday, Tom Brady is retiring for a second time, and this time he says it is for good. After 23 years in the NFL, 7 Super Bowls, and numerous records, Brady announced his decision on Wednesday morning, saying he wouldn't trade a thing about his career. Meanwhile, according to Adam Schefter, an offseason trade of Aaron Rodgers remains an option for the Green Bay Packers for a variety of reasons. And Schefter reports the franchise actually prefers to move on from Rodgers. All right, we got Dan Orlovsky, Damian Woody, and Keyshawn Johnson here to talk about this. Keyshawn, I'm going to start with you on this. If Rodgers goes to the AFC, who is the best quarterback in the NFC?
I would probably have to say Jalen Hurts. That's the guy that's in the Super Bowl, right? That's the guy who took over for Carson Wentz in 2020, went 1-3, whatever you want to call that disaster. A year later, he gets the full-time job. He makes a nice run, gets them into the playoffs. He understands what the pros is all about. They lose to Tampa Bay. He comes back a year later, and he finds himself in the Super Bowl. I think the record was something like 14-1 when he was the starting quarterback and not missing games, and they lost to Washington, whatever. They were never going 18-0, so that doesn't really matter. Statistically, the style of play in which the Philadelphia Eagles utilizes is not going to put up gaudy passing statistics. He's not going to be a 6,000-yard passer regardless if there's 18 games or not. But what he does do is he wins. He's affectionate in terms of when he walks into that locker room and all the things that go on with that football team and leading the charge. Yes, they have great players on both ends of the spectrum, on defense and offense. They got a great offensive line and a dominant defensive front. All good teams have that. But the one thing that I can tell you at the quarterback spot, when he's the quarterback, they're winning, and it looks flawless. He, every now and then, when he came back off the shoulder injury, there was a little bit of dip in play, but that's okay because now he gets the rest against the Kansas City Chiefs. In the Super Bowl, we'll see something different with this arm. But by far, I think he's probably the best guy right now if Rodgers is gone.
Yeah. Listen, I think Jalen Hurts is probably the guy right now. I think are there guys potentially in the NFC that play maybe master the quarterback position maybe better? You could make the case that maybe a guy like Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins has been a heck of a quarterback this year. Just playing purely from the pocket. What I call the quote-unquote traditional way of playing quarterbacks. Yeah. But I think when you look at Jalen Hurts, the improvement that Jalen Hurts has made in that aspect of his game has just been phenomenal. And obviously you got to give a big shout out to Howie Roseman for the acquisition that he's made, over the past couple of years to go along with, the improvement that Jalen Hurts has made. And then you combine that with obviously being a dual threat quarterback. That's the aspect of the new NFL where you see a lot of these guys, these guys coming in that's just taking the quarterback play to another level. So I'm going to go with Jalen Hurts. There might be other guys that might play the traditional role maybe a little bit better than Jalen Hurts right now, but I think right now, as the question is being stated, I'm going to give the edge to Jalen Hurts right now.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from with the traditional role, Woody. I think we're so past that though. You know what I'm saying? You either can play or you can't. I don't care how it looks like, and I would make the case that the traditional role is 10 years ago type thing. You could either go or you can't.
Good.
Jalen Hurts is the next guy. He's the best young quarterback in the NFC. He's going to have a very good career for probably the next 10 years in Philly. But the best quarterback is still Stafford. If Rodgers goes to the AFC, it's still Matthew Stafford. It's still the guy that last season went on one of the, if not the best postseason runs in as far as clutch moments and clutch play that we may have ever seen in the NFL. And I know this past season hurt. LA was decimated by injuries. But if we're looking at a guy that, if we got to win one game, if we need a guy for 1 year, and we get to place that quarterback in the same place, same coaching staff, same system, same surrounding talent, we'll go with the guy that we know can absolutely play at the highest level. That's Stafford. When healthy, he's the guy in the NFC. If Rodgers is gone, he's the guy that we sit there and go, he can make every single throw at every single moment, at every single situation to anybody. And because of the way this season kind of went for their football team and his performance, we're overlooking that. Jalen's the next guy. He's the best young player at that position in the NFC. But when it comes, we could have a conversation too with Geno Smith. We got to put Geno in that conversation now as well. I said that this year. I don't know if there was a quarterback in the NFL, candidly, that made more perfect throws this season than Geno Smith, straight up. I can make that case. So I think it's the NFC is so opposite the AFC. The AFC has so many young superstars. The NFC has got a group of older guys, and then it's Jalen who's coming. Justin Fields, if Chicago handles him the right way, who's coming along. But I just think Stafford's still the best quarterback.
I love you because you love using Matthew Stafford to a fault. I get it, Dan. I understand.
That's his guy. That's his guy. It's
and I
all
get
good.
it. He went on
I
a
threw
magical.
Geno out there.
No,
Kurt could be in the conversation.
But I told you about Geno before the season even started, and a bunch of people, and they looked at me like I had frogs on my face.
I love when you get
conversation.
Keyshawn, I love
one or the other. Yeah, it's going to be tricky. Look, you mentioned Derek Carr. I think, Jacoby Brissett is going to be out there trying to convince somebody he's their starter. That's where we are. And Daniel Jones, Geno Smith, those guys are free agents, but I think everybody thinks they're probably likely to stay where they are. Right? Anything can happen, but it's going to be tough. There's the entire NFC South needs a quarterback, right? All four teams. The Raiders need to figure something out. And
Dan, the Raiders haven't given Carr permission yet, huh?
Well, no. Permission for what?
To seek a trade.
No, the Raiders would love to trade Carr, but.
Have they given him permission, him and his representatives?
Well,
I read somewhere that they didn't.
No, see, the deal is he has a no-trade clause, so, they could come to him with a deal, and then he could say yes or no to it.
Okay.
But the trick with Carr is on February 15th, his money for this year becomes guaranteed, and a chunk of next year's money. So if you're Carr, you're sitting there thinking, well, I'm not going to agree to a trade. Why would I help the Raiders? No, either cut me so I can go be a free agent, pick my team, or, I'm happy to stay and have that money guaranteed 3 days after the Super Bowl.
Right, so they will cut him.
I think so. I think unless he wants to do them the favor of agreeing to a trade.
Which he won't. So really, if you have the cash, you can go get Derek Carr if you want.
If you want to. Look, what's a starting quarterback on the market going to go for these days? 35 plus, 40 million a year? Yeah.
Derek Carr
you have that to spend?
Absolutely.
So Dan, if you're the 49ers, do you try to get a guy like Derek Carr?
Well, Kyle said yesterday that they weren't going to get what was the expression? Like a high-end veteran quarterback? I think they're going to need to probably look at bringing in a veteran because of the uncertain health status of Lance and Purdy. So, I mentioned Brissett, right? Here's a guy that you've seen. He held it down until Deshaun Watson came back. He filled that role pretty well for Cleveland.
He was okay.
So if you don't think right, but if you're saying, well, we need a guy who can start maybe the first 4 or 5 games of the season, and I'm just pulling that number. I have no idea how many.
Not bury you.
And then be a reliable backup the rest of the way. That's a pretty good guy that fits that description. So I don't know whether he's going to be looking for something more than that. And it is going to be a little bit of a seller's market there because there's probably more demand than supply. But I think if you're the 49ers, you have to look at some kind of veteran option in case those guys aren't ready to start the season.
Dan, obviously seeing Sean Payton go to Denver the other day, do you think it was a mistake for the Cowboys or the Chargers not to go after Payton?
Yes, I think I think he's a better coach than the coaches they have.